We now have quorum, so I will call the Toronto Community Housing Board's Building Investment Finance and Audit Committee's meeting to order. Welcome to the public session of today's committee meeting. Let me begin with an acknowledgement that the land each of us is on as we hold this virtual hybrid meeting is the traditional territory of many nations, including the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabe, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat peoples, and is now home to many diverse First Nations, Inuit, Métis peoples. We also acknowledge that Toronto is covered by Treaty 13 with the Mississaugas of the Credit. During today's public session, 9 reports are brought forward to the committee's approval, and 7 reports are brought forward to the committee's information. We do not have any deputations in today's meeting. So with that, we'll get started with our usual declaration of regarding any conflicts of interest from the committee.
Mr. Chair, I just wanted to point out a couple of errors in the agenda. The first one relates to item 9C, and the action noted in the agenda is for approval, but rather the action noted should be received for information. And then the second item I wanted to draw to the committee's attention is item 12. And at page 2 of the report, there's a reference to the PAC having a delegated approval to $2.5 million, but the actual delegated approval is 5. So it's just to correct the reference at page 2 of that report to $2.5 million, correct it to 5.
Thank you. Conflicts of interest? Seeing none, none noted. We'll go to the agenda with those 2 minor clarifications. Items to be held by committee members. Go ahead, John.
Hold number 10, please.
Item 10. Any other items? I'll hold 9C as well as 10 as well as 14. Any other items to be held? Do you have anyone on? Brian, any other items from the that I can't see behind me? Anyone waving their hand vigorously to hold any items? Seeing some shake.
You're on the public agenda?
Public agenda.
Yep. No, I'm okay.
It is okay.
Okay. Yeah, go ahead.
Mr. Chair, I would like to add an item to the agenda. If we could, I'd like to add that we get a verbal update on Swansea Muse.
Okay.
Okay.
We'll add that to the end of the agenda. Any update that's available at this time. Okay. With that, can I have a motion to approve the consent agenda? Thank you, Naram. All in favor? Carried. We'll move on to our first held item, which I have already forgotten. What's that?
And
9C.
9C.
9C. Sorry.
9C facilities. Just go to my notes here. So really here, just paying attention to demand capital. It looks like we're tracking well right now. Maybe you can make a couple comments in terms of this relates to our overall capital spend, demand capital versus planned capital, how we're tracking, and any comments or opinions about sort of going forward that we should be aware of at this time.
Thank you. Through the chair. Yes, we continue to do well with our demand capital in terms of generally demand capital was on a straight line spend throughout the year, generally speaking. And we should be at about 25 million. We're at just over 20 million spent. So we are behind on demand capital spending, which is a good thing because then that allows us to have, we believe, if we continue on this trend, that we'll then be able to free up some of the money that has been allocated in the budget to demand to be put into planned, which is, a benefit to us. We continue to work with the various divisions within the company, operations, finance, IT, with the working committee that we have, looking at the demand spending and not just demand spending in capital, but demand spending overall, also from the operating perspective. We continue to work, that committee continues to work on the items that they have. And I'll be cautiously optimistic and say that, we are seeing positive results from it. If I do look, though, compared to this time last year, really April was sort of the tipping point last year for where we started to see it really increase. We haven't seen that yet, but as I say, we're being cautiously optimistic, but it is positive trending for sure.
And I'll remind the committee, our annual capital spend, the amount that goes to planned capital really makes a difference in the FCI, whereas the demand capital is really, just R&M on the buildings. At next committee meeting, we're going to have a discussion on where we're at with overall FCI as well as a forecast. So this sort of feeds into if we can keep the allocation to planned capital in perfect world even because demand capital came less, that'll make a bigger impact to FCI. And if demand capital spikes like it has the last several years, the planned capital will be correspondingly less, and therefore FCI will be negatively impacted in terms of the overall quality of where the boards are. So we just want to highlight the importance of this and expect to sort of have this discussion on a regular basis on how we're tracking on demand capital relative to planned capital. Any other questions on this item? Okay. I believe this is for information. Have someone move to receive. Thank you, John. All in favor? Carried. Next item 10. So, John, did you want to go with questions or overview?
Right, just a couple of questions. So outlined at the outset of the report is the city's goal of 65,000 new rent-controlled homes. Has it, I guess this is for the CEO, has it been determined whether or not those are planned to be Toronto Community Housing units, or are they going to be market units? What, or a mix? Has the city indicated how that is going to play out?
We can share them.
Yeah.
So through the chair, yeah, there's still work going on to determine exactly what that ratio is going to look like. So in the short time I've been here, I've been involved in a few different conversations with the city already, looking at the alignment of mandates between various organizations and who's going to take on what responsibilities as we continue to flesh out the 65,000 homes plan. There is a breakdown of what they want to see in terms of how many RGI homes versus how many affordable rental homes, but there is not yet an allocation to say Toronto Community Housing should run this many of them, and then this many should go to nonprofits or co-ops or what have you. That's sort of still in the mix in terms of where they might fall.
And so we don't know. We don't know how many of these will, if any, will be TCHC units, and yet we are now responsible for spending of $650,000 for 12 potential housing sites on TCHC lands. which may or may not be TCHC buildings. And so I guess the question is, why is this the TCHC cost? I mean, I know we're all part of the city, right? And maybe, and I suppose it's splitting hairs, but if this is a city initiative, why isn't the city through Create TO undertaking this?
So through the chair, a reasonable question. We've been participating in identifying what are potential sites that can be used for development. So we've identified a number of sites through Toronto Community Housing. I know that the city and Create TO have done a similar exercise. So everyone is currently spending some amount to try to identify what are those optimal sites, but they need to now come together and look at which ones are we actually going to plan to move forward with. And that's perhaps where the next round of spending and effort is really going to come into play. So there's ongoing conversations with the city about who should shoulder the cost of doing that. But right now, we've each been asked to assess our own, and this is the cost to do the ones that we've brought forward.
So we have no choice. We're paying for it.
That's the approach we take on the working assumption that this is looking to expand the total capacity of affordable rental and RGI units, and that Toronto Community Housing would have a role to play in those in the future.
I would also expect the transfer sale of any lands to any other third party would have a consideration of whether market or not, and that would then our cost basis, including costs expended to date, would be a factor in that consideration. So the best, I think, given the early stage, with this position to advance it to a stage at least where it can go to the next level, whether we take it to the next level or not. That's my impression.
Right, and then, so my last question is a follow-up to the first question. At what point in time will the city council be debating what the appropriate mix will be? I mean, I don't know if if the mayor's office or the city manager has given any indication as to when this will come forward or how it will come forward in terms of a decision. So Toronto Community Housing has 50,000 units now with the Seniors Corporation. I don't know that the debate hasn't taken place as to whether or not the new entity of Toronto Community Housing will be 75,000 units or 100,000 units or 115,000 units. And I mean, strategically, it has big implications for the corporation.
Through the chair, you're exactly right. So the total number of units is actually 60,000 right now, including the seniors portfolio. But that debate as to what the size ought to be in the future is part of the discussion that has to come forward. My understanding is that the city is currently working on both the alignment of mandates, so who will undertake what activities going forward, and the discussion of the breakdown of the portfolio. That was originally intended to come forward very shortly. I believe it was actually in June, but I understand that has now been bumped out. It might be in July now.
It's a good point. I don't think the answer is unknown at this time, but we should continue to raise it as an important consideration because substantial change either way has implications organization wide. And so we should be ahead of that. There's a question on the board. Was it Brian?
Yeah, thanks. Two things. Since this is a major area for TCHC, two things. One, what is our way of having input into that city decision so that we can, I mean, we've debated this question of size and mix many times before, but that's important rather than the city deciding and then we are left with, trying to implement that without having, direct input into it. So I guess that's one question. And the second is, since this is going to be such a large area for the city and for TCHC potentially, whether either we should be having a separate group, whether it be a subcommittee of BIFAC or a committee of the board that looks at future development of TCHC and the mix and those kind of issues as we go forward. So I just wanted to put that out. I know it's not a decision today, but it worries me that we may be asked to do things that we haven't had any input, direct input into that. So I know we have it through staff, but we need perhaps to as a board formulate what we feel is in the best interest for the tenants and for the corporation, and put forward our views. Maybe this will come out of our strategic planning session coming up, but I just want to throw those two issues out.
Thank you, Brian. Any responses to that? Go ahead.
Through the chair, it's a great question. I wanted to flag that there is a process in place that does guide us in terms of our communications with the city and putting forward from first BIFAC and then the board, and then to city council. It's the initial development proposal process. It is a kind of staged approval, and it's part of our approval for revitalizations. So what it does is it allows us full line of sight on the proposal as we bring it through BIFAC and to the board. And then the board would then approve it to be submitted to city council through their approvals process. So that report outlines the costs of the projects, the phasing associated with it, and also the mix of units and what those would look like. So there is a full line of sight process that would give both this committee and TCHC board an ability to review and comment.
I would know.
So
Go ahead.
So it's not so much on individual projects, but more strategic. I mean, 58,000 units, it's the second largest housing corporation in North America. We know all the challenges that we currently face. And I guess looking back on the mayor's task force report and some of the recommendations coming out of it, I think we need to have a larger debate on what is the optimal size, for the corporation in order to serve our tenants well, and therefore, just moving forward. If the city, it's no question that we need more housing. It's just a question what's the best way to deliver it for the tenants that are going to be in our current housing as well as the new housing. So it's more a strategic discussion, I think, than an individual. Here's a project. We've got some land. Do we do it or we don't do it? But I think we just need a little larger strategic discussion at some point, and hopefully we can have that at our upcoming meeting.
Yeah, no, agreed. Thank you, Brian. Go ahead, Sean.
Through the chair, yeah, appreciate you raising it, and we absolutely do need to have more of a discussion. I will say, the size of the portfolio is one thing. Another element that we've been talking a lot about is the mix, right? The ratio of what the different kinds of units are that we operate, and how that affects us, not just from a financial sustainability perspective, but also from a community development and supports perspective, because they're equally important. I do want to make that an important part of the conversation the board has at its strategic planning session. I would love to get input directly from the board and have an established position that we can bring forward. I have regular executive meetings with city executive on the 65,000 homes executive group. So that's a chance to influence that process moving forward. But it's also something that we can take forward essentially as an advocacy position to say, this is what would work best for how we continue to operate the buildings we currently have, as well as add to the new portfolio. Because it's really a unique opportunity while we're growing to address some of the challenges we currently face today as well.
And I guess with Parthy and our other councillors, to have them engaged in our strategic discussions, I think is really important, because they also can represent us directly at council when those discussions are going on. So I look forward to having those discussions with our councillor board members.
Thank you, Brian, for raising that. In my mind, there's three big takeaways there. There's the strategic element of not just individual buildings, plans. It's what's our overall vision and how they all fit together. And then Sean, you raised two great sort of lenses to look at the financial. We'd love to keep moving the organization to a more financially sustainable, which will take time, but let's make sure directionally we're going the right way. And secondly, what's best for the communities in terms of making the community stronger and more vibrant and more sustainable over time. and how do we use development as a tool in that regard. So, let's try and get away from just individual decisions and think about it as a collective. And I think the board's strategy session would be a good chance to sort of pull us around those views. Go ahead, John.
So just before we wrap up this item, I see that there is a paragraph in here on Swansea Mews and
I do a point.
interrupted me when I was moving the, motion to add it to the agenda, but I missed it. And so maybe you could just, I can read what's here, but I know that the process is that we're supposed to have a development application or proposal before the demolition. And so what is going on with the city in terms of those discussions?
So through the chair, great question. We're actively working with the city right now and preparing that initial development proposal for Swansea Mews. It's a high level kind of opportunities report that will go to BIFAC and the board. We're targeting this summer and then to city council in September, October. So we're looking to get through that process relatively quickly. We are engaged with city staff in all divisions to look at what the opportunities could be and also what potential limitations could be for servicing, et cetera, for the property. And we're looking to bring those into one report. As I said, it'll be here. We're targeting in the summer at our next, actually, I suppose at our next BIFAC meeting. And then we will move that through the approvals process and looking to start demolition by the end of this year. It's a very aggressive schedule and there's a lot of coordination that we're looking to bring together as this process, but the city is at the table and we're working through the issues.
And so ultimately, there was no way to expedite the demolition without going through the process.
We're still following that as a parallel path, but we're keeping both open at this time. We have not had confirmation that there's a ability to expedite.
Yeah, just jumping on John's point, in a perfect world, we could just bypass the whole process, demo it, and then do the proper, thoughtful development plan, as opposed to rushing a development plan to get the demo to then rethink the development plan because we had to rush it because we wanted to get it demoed. Like this feels like a special circumstance where the normal rules shouldn't apply. We're going to rebuild the housing, and so the reason to not demo doesn't feel applicable or appropriate in this circumstance. So it'd be great to hear the city say, no, that is the appropriate path, as opposed to, because in the best case scenario, what's your estimate if we follow the plan, this aggressive timeline, is it January where the buildings get demoed? Best case scenario?
Yes, we're targeting sort of end of year start for the demolition process.
Yeah.
So one further question. So I know the staff's position at the city and here on this, and I know the local councilor's position, which is not really, I think, in our best interests. But has the mayor's office been involved in this process? Is the mayor's office aware of, what's happening and where the roadblock is?
So through the chair, this was actually discussed at our last board meeting and the same sort of question was raised. And the decision we took out of that board meeting was to continue working through the local councilor first to try to resolve this. That's essentially the approach that Jessica just described was exactly that. So we are working hard to try to get the local councilor on side with the approach that we're taking and hopeful that this is going to do that for us.
Good luck.
What's the local council position?
Question from Brian.
Yeah, I mean, I believe I've raised this. I mean, the fact that this is costing us and therefore the city funds on a monthly basis to maintain security and other costs related to the project. And the fact that I can understand why is there for general development. City definitely needs to know what's going to be developed on a site that's going to be demolished. But in this case, the city controls exactly what we can build. So it just doesn't seem to make a lot of sense to be spending money that neither the city or us have on an ongoing basis. So it just it baffles me that a obvious, in my view, decision to have a demolition sooner isn't allowed by the city. So it just, on the one hand, they're telling us to be frugal and watch our pennies, and on the other hand, they're forcing us to spend money that we really don't need to spend. So it just, it baffles me that, that there's these
I think,
different.
I think everyone around the table would violently agree with you, Brian. Naram, any, Glenn?
Baffles is a good word. Sorry, Sean, I just want to make sure that the councillor's position to date in all conversations is you have to follow the development process timeline. Jessica, same thing. Sorry, it could go to either of you.
Through the chair, that's correct. The councillor would like to have a commitment to replace in advance of there being a demolition permit, and that's the normal process for revitalization. And so that's the path that we're following. I want to flag just a little bit on the previous comment about rushing the IDP process, and I agree this is a faster process than normal, but I want to just flag that there will be a full rezoning and master planning process with public engagement and all of those pieces that will happen once the IDP is approved. So the plan itself will be fully vetted and rounded out with all of the necessary engagements, and that's the normal initial development proposal. So it will be a very high level proposal, but I just wanted to flag that process.
Which it just seems like, again, boggles the mind why we have to tick that box when there's a full rezoning engagement process to follow the guidance, right? So
Through a commitment to replace, could we not make that offer? Just simply saying, yes, we will replace, now approve, like, instead of actually going through that process? Like, I'm speaking legally also, like, could we not? Has anyone had that conversation? Rather than actually, and the answer has been.
The challenge is the formal legislative process that allows them to be able to secure the rental housing demolition application, which is normally tied to a rezoning. So it is earlier because it's being tied to the IDP. So it has to be tied to some sort of vision typically for the property, even if it's high level.
Okay, just so we're clear, councillors can outvote the local councillor. I'm just saying. Join that.
Yeah, out in America.
good luck. Good luck.
I never
Also-
like to do that though.
Through the chair, I don't want to leave committee members with the impression that the local councillor is not supportive. We actually have a good working relationship, and he is supportive with where we are going and what the ultimate vision for it is. I think it's a debate on process. And I also don't want folks to believe that we're following simply the standard process. This is an expedited process. We are moving more quickly than would typically be allowed in this environment, but it is not simply, we'll make a commitment to replace, and so therefore we can demolish tomorrow. We're not quite at that pace, obviously.
So I think that's appreciated. I think what's really frustrating is at this point, from my lens, if the councillor wants to keep having these conversations, the councillor should take responsibility for 100,000 plus in expenditures that TCHC is incurring, which is really the city's money. Like, that's all nice. We're all for that process, but like, money's being burnt to private sector as we have these conversations, and that is, baffled is the word Brian used. Incredibly frustrating and disappointing is the words that I would use. But I'll stop. I'll stop there because
Go ahead, Buzzy.
Hi, sorry about that. Just getting off mute. I had a few questions and comments on the 12 sites. Should I have made those in private, in camera?
Yeah. Yes.
Okay. Maybe I'll take them offline when I later on.
Any other questions or comments on this item?
Sorry, quick question. The IDP, if you could if staff could quickly walk me through the variation in this process.
Happy to through the chair. So the initial development proposal process is part of the TCHC's. It's called the New Approvals Framework for TCHC Revitalizations. This is a process that was approved by council in 2019, and it outlines a stage gate approval process of moving through a revitalization, with the first step being an initial development proposal, which is a high level kind of opportunity study that sort of looks at what the high level financials could be, what some of the development priorities could be, and then what some of the built form components would be on the property. And what it does is it allows both this committee, TCHC board, and then city council to have line of sight on the planning processes for revitalization. And once those approvals are in place, it allows the project to move forward and be entered into either a release to market, if that is the pathway that is determined, or ultimately it goes to the next stages of design for rezoning or an OP. And those processes are all outlined in the delivery framework. And there's also a big part of that initial development proposal is the engagement requirements. So there'll be an engagement plan typically as part of that talks about both engagements with residents and tenants and the surrounding area as well.
Okay, great. Thank you. That's it.
Seeing no more questions or comments, I'll ask for a motion to receive. Thank you, John. All in favor? Carried. For approval. Thank you, John. All in favor? Carried. Next item, do we jump to 14 now?
No.
Okay, my question here is, we have Kareem or no? Is it on the screen? Yes.
He was online.
Just Where's there, we have at least two of the studio up top. And then I think it's.
You know, in much of the time, I can follow up with Kareem one-on-one. So let's, if there's unless there's any other questions or comments, we can move to receive. Thank you, John. All in favor? Carried. And I believe that's the last item on the public agenda. Is there any other business from committee members before we adjourn the public session? Silence is golden. With that, can I have a motion to adjourn the public session? Thank you, Naram. All in favor? Carried. Public session is now adjourned. Thank you very much.